Well, good evening, and welcome to the Royal College of Art, Battersea campus, and a sunny September day that we specially organised for you. I'm Rama, and I have the honour of directing the centre and the wonderful people associated with it. So there's a couple of housekeeping rules before we start. We're not planning a fire alarm, so if you hear a fire alarm go off, please form an orderly queue behind me and exit the building. Also, we have a photographer who is right here. If any of you don't want to be photographed or don't want to appear, please let the front team know, and we'll make a record of that. Don't worry, the photographs aren't going to end up on the 9 o'clock news or anything. They are just for our record. So I want to start by welcoming you all, our network of friends, family, and contributors. Welcome to our RCA colleagues and our research partners, and special mention to Helen Hamlyn and her trust who make everything possible. Helen, you are fundamental to this and to this evening. And welcome to our global audience. For the first time, we're actually live streaming on YouTube. We've had messages this morning from people tuned in to this event from Brazil, the US, Asia, India and Europe, just to mention a few locations. Inclusive design really has gone big. So, speaking to those online and those in the room, welcome to you all. Today is a very special showcase of our work. Design is a powerful tool for transformation. All the projects we do aim to shine light on the challenging social issues that are around us and to work with real people. From mental health to food health, antibiotics to airlines, virtual reality to fashion technology, we will look at different forms of exclusion and address them. This is the joy of design, and this is the impact of research. Of special mention are our partners from business, government, academia, and the public sector, all of whom breathe life into our work. We work across sectors that include health, transport, energy, finance, technology, and property development. In the public sector, we have worked with academia, museums, trusts, and charities. You see all the logos over the screen, but each project will announce them individually. To give a quick snapshot of the centre, starting with my activities, clockwise from top left, we present our work in mainstream media and bring it into public consciousness. I've developed and delivered training in inclusive design and creative leadership, my own personal research area, and published in the academic press, bottom left. The centre was also awarded a Hall of Fame winner award for its 28-year body of work, and as director, I was very honoured to receive that award. We also reorganised our structure this year. Our two research groups at the top focus on population ageing and healthcare, two critical global challenges that hit every headline. Our two impact areas at the bottom, they look at bringing inclusive design into two areas. Social impact works in different global contexts, and business impact looks at how we directly engage business through larger scale projects, knowledge exchange projects, and executive education. We also partner conferences and curate exhibitions. Top left, you see the first ever inclusive design conference in Thailand, which we partnered and were present at. Bottom left, sort of in the yellow there, you can see a yellow glow on screen, is our newly appointed Professor of Accessible Design, Joanne Bichard, at the Healthy City International Design Congress. And on the right are images of exhibitions we've been involved with. Centre staff also take inclusive design globally through field research, conferences, events, workshops, advisory boards, and publications. I think between us, we sit on a number of advisory boards. It often feels like we're quietly but gently taking over the world. On international Programme of Executive Education continued. Top left, you see Professor Jeremy Myosin talking about design thinking using a T-shirt. We have yoga sessions, top right, with the Isha Yoga Centre run as part of our creative leadership work, with bespoke workshops for Panasonic, bottom left, and other large companies. And bottom right, you see students from the IE Business School in Madrid creating an umbrella impression extension of themselves. We have completed over 300 projects, training 200 designers, most of whom are RCA graduates. Many of them spend between 1 to 5 years at the centre and undergo training, though we like to sometimes call it a little bit of brainwashing. Many have gone on to do amazing things. On screen, you see 4 individuals. Anab Jain, who looked at digital futures with us, and in 2012, she imagined a future in 2020. She then went on to be a futurist and found Superflux, an experimental design studio, very much progressing her work. Matthew Dearlove, top right, is an architect who worked with London communities and is head of design at the Greenwich Peninsula. Ross Atkin, bottom right, his projects at the centre focused on accessible technology, and you might recognise him from BBC Two's Big Life Fix, solving issues for people with disabilities on screen. Ross was named by that programme as one of 8 of the most innovative designers in the UK, and he traces a lot of that back to his training and heritage here at the college. Dr. Dan Lockton, bottom left, worked with us on a large EU-funded project on domestic energy consumption, and he's now an assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon. So all of the centre's alumni represent the best of the RCA, the best of the centre, and the best of inclusive design. Many are visible and vibrant ambassadors of both design and inclusive design. And I think this is one of the biggest impacts that we could have had as a centre. It's not just about the projects that we do or the partners that we work with. It's also the people we train and that we produce. The centre will be 30 years old in 2021. And as the centre that put design and ageing on the map ages itself, I can think of no better designer than Coco Chanel to inspire us. She said, "You can be gorgeous at 30, charming at 40, and irresistible for the rest of your life." So I hope you find our work this evening irresistible and inclusive. And now to speak about some further milestones and anniversaries for the centre, can I ask Professor Jeremy Myosin, the Helen Hamlyn Chair of Design and co-founder of the centre, to the stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rama. And it's great to be back at this event. And good evening, both to everyone in the room, but also people live streaming around the world. On this occasion, I'd like to draw attention to a couple of important milestones in the life of times of the centre. The first milestone is that tonight's event marks the 20th anniversary of our annual research symposium. We've been showcasing our research since the academic year 99-2000, and this is an enduring stretch over more than 2 decades, and more on that in a moment. The second milestone is perhaps more significant because tonight we mark 25 years, the 25th anniversary of the public definition of inclusive design as a distinct philosophy and approach in design. And as Rama explained, inclusive design forms the bedrock of everything we do in the centre. So first, let me take you back to our first research symposium 20 years ago. And looking around the room, I recognise a few people who were probably there. We introduced our first cohort of research associates, and it's instructive to look back at the design preoccupations of the time. We started a big airport project to make the new Terminal 5 at Heathrow more inclusive. Among our proposals was a public swimming baths in the centre of the airport, which British Airports Authority somehow rejected. But they did accept an acoustic arch, which is shown here at the top, a large-scale micro-architectural information booth, which has now been widely implemented in airports around the world. We work with Dyson, then a company just 6 years old and yet to conquer the world, to investigate how older people cleaned their homes. We also worked with Levi Strauss on the development of a technical fabric to create jeans that harden on impact, providing support for older and disabled people prone to falls. And this was just the start of many industrial collaborations aimed at improving life for all ages and abilities. 20 years ago, we also worked with Leonard Cheshire Foundation to create furniture for disabled home workers, starting the creation of a long line of designed artifacts and prototypes for our future selves. And underpinning all our work with manufacturers, charities, government bodies was a commitment to inclusive design. And that commitment had its intellectual and ideological roots in a pioneering paper presented at the Applied Ergonomics Conference in Toronto in 1994. The presenter was Roger Coleman, the designer and academic with whom I co-founded the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design. And Roger's contribution was to define the central principles of inclusive design in relation to population ageing. And he made 3 big points. Older people were not disabled per se, but disabled by a designed environment that didn't take account of their needs. Older people didn't want special needs design, a ghetto of adaptive aids and appliances that stigmatize. They wanted mainstream design to flex to their requirements. And the way to design a more inclusive world was to persuade companies of the business opportunities of widening the market, rather than using disability legislation to enforce compliance in the built environment. In other words, the commercial carrot rather than the big stick. Now, Roger is retired, living happily as a fine art photographer in France, but he recorded a special message for tonight's symposium.
Inclusive design began over 25 years ago at the Royal College of Art as a way of rethinking the goal and the purpose of the design process. Nothing smaller than that, really. My background at the time in user-centered design and innovation had convinced me that the current model of design for the elderly and disabled was essentially stigmatizing, patronizing, and excluding, in the sense that it treated a significant chunk of the population as a separate and inferior because less able group. What was needed at the time was a new way of thinking about design that could start to see it as an enabling, integrating and affirmative force that could change people's lives for the better. Over the past 25 years, social and technological change has been enormous. But those basic human needs and aspirations have remained essentially the same. We're dealing with a much changed context, but at the heart of it is something which has remained essentially the same. As far as the future goes, I remain positive and optimistic. Thank you.
So, Roger, an optimist even in these dark days. By the time we mounted our first research symposium in 2000, inclusive design was on the map, and Roger even persuaded the Blair government of the time to endorse a formal definition. And it was a process whereby designers ensure that their products, environments, and services address the needs of the widest possible audience. Nothing more complicated than that. So, since I stood down as director of the centre in 2015 and handed over the baton to Rama, I've continued to explore the principles of inclusive design as the Helen Hamlyn Chair of Design, the first endowed chair, incidentally, in the history of the college. I curated the new old exhibition at the Design Museum, and this is now on an international tour and will open in New York in February 2020 at the Pratt Institute Gallery in Manhattan, with a lot of Helen Hamlyn Center projects as part of the display. I've also established a new annual international congress on healthy city design, a partnership between the Centre and Salus. Again, the principles of inclusive design loom large in bringing urban planners, designers, and public health professionals together to create healthier, more accessible, and less polluted cities. The next Congress takes place on the 14th and 15th of October at the wonderful modernist Royal College of Physicians building in London, so do join us. I can also give you a sneak preview this evening of our plans to create a national design hub for ageing to work as part of the Grand Challenge on Ageing announced by the UK government's industrial strategy team last year. This big thinking hub will bring together design and research expertise from all over the UK to address our future needs as we age. It's codenamed the Design Age Institute, and it's an incredibly exciting multi-million-pound development. It's under wraps right now, but look out for a formal announcement in the next few weeks. So, 2 big milestones to celebrate this evening, and they fit into a bigger frame of collaboration between the Helen Hamlyn Trust and the RCA, which dates back to 1991. This is an amazing partnership for which we thank the Trust and Helen Hamlyn personally. And there have been 4 main phases in relation to inclusive design. The first phase, definition, with Roger's paper in Toronto, so pivotal. The second, activation, with our research associates leading the charge. Third, intensification. And now we're into the 4th phase, augmentation, with new directions and new technologies. And tonight you're going to see augmentation of inclusive design in practice with our class of 2019. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I want to welcome our first panel, chaired by Healthcare Research Fellow Johnny West. Johnny, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Jonathan West, and I'm a reader in healthcare design, leading our work in healthcare here at the Centre. The work I'm fortunate enough to supervise spans some interesting themes and design disciplines. Our healthcare work has grown over the years from a focus on hospital and physical health to include mental health, community settings, and global problems such as antimicrobial resistance. 2 of our research associates couldn't be with us tonight, and they've been working on related but very different projects. Shruti Grover has been working on a project called Happy Mamas with King's College and the Season Research Institute. It focuses on improving mental health of young mothers and pregnant women in Manisa in Mozambique. By working with local researchers, Shruti has trained them in inclusive design research techniques. And the project is now moving into the creative phase with a series of workshops and activities. The aim is to identify interventions that can be tailored to the local context, to improve support for young mothers, improve their mental health, and give them the best possible start. Another research associate, Anisha Kanabar, has been working with Philips on a project called Call the Midwife, which looks at the future of midwifery and maternal care in the UK. A recent review of NHS services found that demands on services were changing, and the brief was to research what was happening on the ground. By interviewing many different stakeholders, Anisha identified 3 themes to improve: education, communication, and preparation. These all tended to centre on the pregnant woman's interaction with a midwife during the appointment. A series of co-design sessions led to 3 interrelated concepts, all intended to help communication and education during the appointment, and at the same time making the whole experience more efficient. This would free up time for more meaningful dialogue and better support the woman at every stage. I'd be happy to talk through these interventions in more detail later. But for now, I'd like to invite Indira Knight, Dr. Rosanna Traynor, Hamza Oza and Gianpaolo Fusari up to the stage to start our first panel discussion. Their projects with spin-outs, academia and research councils span virtual reality interventions for psychosis, designed to tackle antimicrobial resistance, infection and architecture, and a design studio embedded within a busy hospital. Perfect timing. So now we're all sitting comfortably. I'd like to begin by asking Indy Knight to kick off by telling us about her project. Indy.
Thanks, Johnny. I'm working on a project called Game Change, led by Oxford University and involving a number of partners. It is funded by the National Institute for Health Research. Game Change is a virtual reality therapy, initially for people in psychosis services, to help them feel more confident in everyday situations. Virtual reality, or VR, is a growing new technology. You wear a headset that completely immerses you in a 360-degree world. The worlds can be convincing enough that you believe in them and act as you would in reality. Game Change is a 3-year project, currently in its second year. The VR application was designed and developed during the first year. This year, clinical trials are being carried out in 5 NHS trusts in England, with 432 people taking part. At the RCA, we worked on the design of the therapy. People with psychosis can feel isolated. The aim of the VR therapy is to try and make it easier for them to go out in everyday environments. It's a self-contained therapy. A virtual coach guides a person through a choice of 6 scenarios: a cafe, a street, a pub, a shop, a GP's waiting room, and a bus. The tasks in the scenarios are designed to help people drop their defense behaviours and challenge their perceptions of a situation. Tasks build in difficulty. For example, in the first level of the pub, the person has to wait for someone in a fairly quiet environment. As the levels progress, the pub gets busier and louder. In a later level, the person is approached by a shaved-head football fan who asks for their help. The designs we delivered are based on psychological principles and the design workshops we ran. We ran 6 design workshops, 5 in the cities connected to the clinical trials, as well as 1 in London. These workshops involve people with lived experience of psychosis, psychologists, and the developers of the application. Through the workshops, patterns and designs emerged. By Christmas 2018, we handed the designs over to the developers. Context is key when designing a VR project. By working with people with lived experience of psychosis alongside the psychologists and developers, we delivered relevant and engaging designs for the therapy. My colleague Paul Eliash made VR prototypes so design ideas could be tested. In June this year, Paul successfully completed his contribution to the project. While running the workshops, a number of interesting insights emerged. One of these was that some people felt disorientated when they took the VR headset off. Not a great feeling, and one that with research could be resolved. My research over the next 2 years will be based on these insights to continue creating designs that challenge the ever-shifting status quo of VR design.
Thanks, Indy. So from mental health to physical health, Dr. Rosanna Traynor, please tell us about your project.
Thanks, Johnny. This healthcare space project is entitled Preserving Antibiotics Through Safe Stewardship. It's a 3-year project with 6 partners led by the University College London and funded by the ESRC. The project aims to design a new set of interventions to support UK prescribers to stick to antibiotic guidelines and to reduce unnecessary prescribing. These are just 2 examples of antimicrobial stewardship, or AMS. AMS seeks to do 2 things: to tackle growing instances of individual, local and global resistance to antibiotics, and to preserve our antibiotics so they'll protect us long into the future. To start the project, the PASS team conducted interviews and observations with healthcare staff. We then explored what we'd captured from behaviour change perspective, and we've also been working with data from electronic health records in new ways. We're doing this across 5 healthcare settings: GP practices, hospitals, care homes, pharmacies, and in the community. This has helped to reveal where antibiotics are being used most and more about why prescribers do what they do. We're also running co-design workshops to find out more about the pressures prescribers are under, what their day-to-day is like, and any hidden stories driving their prescribing habits. This will help to make sure the final interventions will work in harmony with those making prescribing decisions. Within primary care just now, we've brought all of the findings from our different research activities together for the first time. This painted a complex picture about how prescribing works in this setting, but some strong messages emerged. We can now see that each GP practice is faced with entirely different challenges, different staff, patient demographic, access to resources, but also that a common hurdle, such as having lots of elderly patients, for instance, doesn't have to lead to inappropriate prescribing. Rather, it is the combination of testing factors and variables at play, plus the kinds of strategies a practice uses to manage this combination, that reveals where interventions may be best placed to support the right kind of prescribing. We can see there are elements of good practice that low prescribers can share with high prescribers that will facilitate good stewardship, including a healthy team ethos, a dedicated someone to drive AMS plans, and good reflection and communication on how prescribers are doing. But crucially, we've identified new goals that all practices will need to address if we are to improve stewardship across the country. For example, ensuring doctors within the same practice and across the UK say and do the same things, or creating more efficient ways to keep vulnerable patients safe when antibiotics aren't appropriate for them. We can also see that promising interventions are likely to work better when they directly involve working with patients and the community. So for primary care, we're now at the exciting stage of designing and developing interventions with clinicians and patients across the UK. Promising ideas will then be put forward for further research and trials. Next, in the same way, we'll turn our attention to challenges in secondary care and care homes. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosanna. Continuing the research around antimicrobial resistance, Hamza Oza has been looking at its impact on architecture. Hamza.
Thanks, Johnny. Good evening, everyone. I'm working on a project with the University of York called Pathways Practices in Architecture, and it's funded by the Wellcome Trust. The team are researching antimicrobial resistance and how cross-infection is managed in cystic fibrosis clinics. People with CF are vulnerable to bacteria that can grow in their lungs, and cross-infection in clinics is a serious risk as these bacteria can be transmitted between patients. York were interested in learning about the role hospital architecture plays in this and how that might influence future clinical design. My role has been to design and develop a physical and virtual exhibition to display and visualize these findings to encourage knowledge exchange, highlighting how practices of segregation vary across clinics as well as infection controls. Even though both exhibitions share the same stories, each had their own unique requirements. For the physical exhibition, it had to be portable, lightweight, and flexible so that it could be assembled and transported across the UK. Considering the research investigates architecture, having 3D models that people can interact with were key. Here, the idea of projecting came into mind as it fulfilled all the requirements, and it also allowed the reuse of content from the virtual exhibition. A tabletop experience allows people to gather around, discuss the content, and engage with others, all facilitating knowledge exchange. For the virtual exhibition, the aim was to reach patients who couldn't attend in person, so it had to be attractive, simple to use, and engaging. It would also serve as project legacy, a key requirement for Wellcome. The virtual world allowed models to be displayed at full scale with a greater emphasis on user navigation. Originally, the models filled the entire screen, with the sidebar changing as the content selected, but this became congested and highly limiting. So the real question was, how can we recreate that tabletop experience from the physical world into the virtual? So the answer was to create this canvas of the same size and proportion. It allowed me to display the same visuals from the physical exhibition, keeping consistency between the two. By keeping that model in the top right corner, the user can maintain their spatial awareness and build up a picture of how these elements come together. In order to gather the patient feedback, a prominent yellow button was used. This presents the user with a Google form which can be accessed from anywhere in the exhibition. I'm pleased to announce that today we're doing the soft launch of the exhibition, which all of you can access at the following link. To date, we have successfully exhibited at key 3 locations around the UK which have received positive feedback and interest, successfully meeting the key objectives of both the partners and the funder. While this project is coming to an end, the PARC team will be continuing their research in the near term. Using these tools, they will display their findings to stimulate further research and discussion on healthcare and architecture and how design can shape this in the future. I'd like to end my talk with a final word from Nick Brown, who's the lead researcher at the York team. As a social scientist, this has been a great opportunity to team up with creative designers to explore more interactive approaches to engage our stakeholders. As you might have been coming into the auditorium, you may have noticed a working demo outside, and I would encourage all of you to stop by after the presentations to experience that and the virtual exhibition for yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. Our final presentation on this panel is by our Senior Research Associate, Gianpaolo Fusari, who is seconded to the Helix Centre at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington. Gianpaolo.
Thanks, Johnny. Hope everybody is doing well. I am working on a project on stroke rehabilitation. At the center, we do many other projects, but I'm going to present my stroke work. So, stroke is the biggest cause of disability in the UK, and the biggest problem with disability is arm disability. There's over 500,000 people who have survived stroke living in the UK with an arm disability. It's possible to recover from this, but it involves a lot of repetitive rehabilitation. And the problem with the way it's given or delivered today is that with the 45 minutes of therapy that people receive, they're only achieving about 10% of what is required to create brain changes. So they're only achieving about 30 repetitions per session when they should be really be doing about 300 to 400. Furthermore, the cost of care after stroke is staggering. At the moment, it's about 25 billion in the UK, and this is growing. And contrary to what you might believe, the majority of these costs are not carried by the NHS or social care. It's mainly the families and other informal care that has to be set for people. So the majority of the costs are carried by carers and families informally. Stroke survivors describe their journey after stroke to be like pushing a rock up a hill. We've been working with a lot of them and their carers to understand what life after stroke really is. We've been also collaborating with over 100 therapists in acute and community hospitals to just gain a little bit of a better understanding of what the complexity of the problems are. And I can summarize some of these findings or the problems that we've discussed in these 4 points. So from the point of view of the survivor, they feel that there's a lack of support after they've been discharged from hospital. They feel like they've been thrown off a cliff. Secondly, it's really difficult for them to gauge their progress as they rehabilitate. So there's no real benchmarks or points for them to understand how much they've progressed. From the other side, from the point of view of the therapist, they also feel that there's a little bit of a black box of what happens when they're not with the patient. So sometimes they prescribe some therapy and they expect the patient to do it on their own, but they can't really tell if they've done it or not. So that was something that came up. And lastly, there's a lot of emphasis on getting people to move, so walk out of the bed, sit, or go to the toilet. And that's the emphasis that hospitals put. So they put the arm, they forget about it. So rehab for the arm only happens much later. But if you think about it, if people want to go back to work, it's easier to search for a compensating strategy for moving from A to B. But a substitute for the arm is really tricky to find. So we think that rehabilitation for the arm should come much sooner. So throughout the about 18 months to 2 years of work that we've been doing on this, we have developed this solution called On Track. And basically our aim is to convert daily activity into an opportunity for rehabilitation. So we understand that 45 minutes of therapy is not going to be enough for people to do those 300 to 400 repetitions. So let's look at opportunities outside of that time. So we're doing this in two ways. One, by passively tracking how much people are actually doing with their arm. And secondly, by providing coaching, personalized coaching for people. And hopefully this will enable us to see more what's happening when the therapist is not there, and also support people in the way that they need. We did a little pilot study last summer with about 10 participants over 7 weeks. And the results that we showed there were quite encouraging. On average, we saw people doing about an hour more of activity. And participants felt much more confident to use their arm in everyday activities. So some of the quotes that we saw from people, they were saying exactly that. They were more confident to use their arm. They were eager to try new activities. So that was quite positive. But now we're very excited because we've just started a feasibility trial. Last week, we had our first participant. So we will be trialing the new developed app that we have over this year, 1 year, with about 24 participants, hoping to get a final sample size of 12. And use this as a stepping stone for a larger randomized control trial. So the intervention will be delivered over 14 weeks, where on the first week we do some baseline assessments, so we just get the activity of how much they are actually doing currently. Then we give them 12 weeks of the on-track intervention, and then we gather a final baseline or a final assessment. So as I said, we had our first participant come in last week, and we'll be going on for 12 months, more or less, and hopefully we'll get some results early next year, but please talk to me afterwards if you want to learn more about what we're doing, and hopefully I'll have more updates next year for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gianpaolo. And that goes for all of us. Please do come and say hello after as well. Delighted to tell you more. So that concludes our panel. I'd like to introduce Dr. Chris Mckinley up to invite the next panel. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Chris Mckinley, and I lead the Age and Diversity Research Space. Jeremy spoke about inclusive design and ageing, where the centre began. Today, it's as critical as it ever was. It's not going away. Indeed, it's getting bigger. And, as Jeremy hinted at, we have some exciting developments around the corner that will be keeping us very busy, and we're really looking forward to revealing more shortly. Within the age and diversity space, our mission is to use design and empathy to improve lives, to counter manifestations of ageism and other damaging assumptions that influence the way design is realised. We continuously develop the conversation around inclusive practice. We've been working hard to inspire those that influence the designed world to engage and to empathise with broader lived experiences. From schoolroom settings through to the Department of Health, we've been addressing how the UK can better engage with the opportunities that age and diversity present. Within our Research Associates programme, we've started new conversations around sensory diversity. In our project with RNIB, we've developed strategies to engage the public, helping them to understand different experiences of vision and vision loss. In this project, we targeted younger cohorts. So within primary school settings, we're helping children develop a sensitivity and an understanding of difference. And Luca will tell you more about that shortly. With Welcome, we've developed a collection of experience-enhancing objects, strategies, maps, and training packs that will allow the visitor experience team at Welcome to better engage with neurodiverse visitors, and for neuro non-typical people to have better control of their visit to Welcome's exhibitions and collections. Natasha will tell you a little more about that. With TFL, we're working closely with cohorts of their staff to create an inclusive design manifesto. That will be rolled across the entire TFL network, covering everything from carriages to customer services. And Lizzie will be going into a little detail around that in a moment. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask the researchers from our current projects to please take a seat. So yeah, it's actually me again now. Dr. Will Rennell is our research associate on the Heart and Soul at the Hub project, but unfortunately is unable to join us this evening, so I'll be giving his presentation. Heart and Soul is an award-winning creative arts company and charity working and run by people with learning disabilities and autistic people. In October 2018, Heart and Soul became the latest residents of the Hub at the Welcome Collection. This is a research space where people from different backgrounds and expertise collaborate on projects exploring medicine, life, and art. Myself and Will are part of an interdisciplinary team that includes disabled and non-disabled artists and researchers. We're almost a year into this 2-year project. So, some context for this project. There are 1.5 million people with learning disabilities in the UK, 51% of which report feeling lonely. 32% of UK prisoners are people with learning disabilities. People with learning disabilities are 3 times more likely to die from causes that could have been prevented by high-quality healthcare. And within wider statistics, 2/3 of the British public feel uncomfortable talking to a disabled person. Just 4% of the arts workforce is disabled, and hate crimes against disabled children are on the rise. So with this context in mind, we're aiming to bring together artists, scientists, researchers, and clinicians to uncover new insights into how relationships between people with and without learning disabilities affect mutual well-being, looking specifically at ideas of human value, difference, productivity, and love. Some of our design interventions so far have been an access audit. We delivered this using inclusive design methods to position the needs of people with learning disabilities at the heart of the redesign of Welcome's 5th floor. This included workshops and an access report which informed a refurbishment. The Wall of Change, we worked with an illustrator, Ben Connors, to create a mural of objects and spaces reimagined by autistic people and people with learning disabilities. This was installed at the Welcome Collection for 2 months and invited the public to submit their ideas on things they would change, redesign, or redevelop, and we collected over 300 responses, which is a data set we're still working with. Beyond that, the Wall of Change informed 2 design futuring workshops that we titled Inclusive Futures. There was 35 people with learning disabilities and autistic people involved in these, and they shared their ideas and got involved in the creative process, redesigning using 2D, 3D, and sonic materials. So, as I say, we're at a kind of halfway point. We're getting to the kind of exciting point where we've collected a lot of data. And we're hoping that the outcomes will be to enable people with learning disabilities to have the power to lead, to take part in research on their own terms, and to put medical and care practice under the microscope. We're building a highly accessible and interactive website to be used as a research tool that will share outputs in accessible ways. We plan to publish papers and chapters with creative and accessible alternatives in place as well, because you have to understand that the majority of traditional forms of academic publishing are completely inaccessible to many people that want access. We're building an evidence base to influence wider policy and practice, and we're delivering a substantial program of events designed and delivered by people with learning disabilities, including talks, presentations, music, and performance. And finally, we'll be continuing to distribute broadcast content across media, including television, radio, news, and specialist publications. So thanks for listening to that. I'm now going to pass you on to Lizzie, who will tell us a bit about the work we've been doing with TfL.
So Minding Gaps is a scoping project that we're undertaking with TfL, or Transport for London. And the project will set an agenda and criteria for the future inclusive transport for London, system for London, through the outline of an inclusive design manifesto. Our aim is to work with TfL to identify gold standard inclusive design projects, both externally and from within their own work, uniting their vision of inclusive design across what is a large and varied organisation. And the project continues the Centre's long-standing relationship with TfL and with transport and infrastructure projects in general. So the strategic document will inform all areas of the organisation, from digital platforms to physical ones, and from marketing to service planning. TfL are actively pushing an inclusive strategy across all of their services and staffing, aiming to move away from the medical models of disability in their approach, but to instead focusing on the full spectrum of people, so people who live, work and visit London, and not on specific conditions. So case studies include things from TfL, such as Underground in Bloom, shown here, which provides areas on the network for us all to grab a few moments of peace, quiet and reflection and space. And then centre projects, so this is a BSI project, is also highlighted, called Design for the Mind, which looks to innovate new standards for neurodiversity in the built environment. And also looking more globally, so looking here at the Fukuoka Transport Network in Japan. But the manifesto will promote and inspire internal innovation and wider transportation companies to push inclusive design. So going beyond the regulation or minimum design standards, shown here, to actively develop and promote spaces that are accessible, safe, less stressful and more positive for people. So one example of this is that TfL will continue their great work across step-free access, but they're also looking to expand into other areas such as neurodiversity, sensory and social inclusion and accessibility. They hope to make their services as accessible and usable by as many people as is reasonably possible. For example, taking inspiration from the success of the Baby on Board badge, TfL have launched the Please Offer Me a Seat badge, and this year renewed their work around priority seats for those with hidden disabilities, highlighting TfL's commitment to creating safer, more inclusive and more accessible end-to-end journeys for their customers, combining their approaches to equality and inclusive design with their policies on health and safety and in the environment, and in order to maximise the improvements for real people. This is ongoing work and will continue in the coming months, bringing in experts in the fields of neurodiversity and inclusion to expand and develop the manifesto, turning Minding Gaps into a springboard for future innovation at TfL.
Thanks very much, Lizzie. And I think that's a great example of how groups are really from the top level trying to engage with the inclusive conversation. So this pre-visit stage that TfL are trying to understand kind of leads nicely into Natasha's work, and she's going to tell us about Design in the Mind.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. Design in the Mind is a 2-year project that focuses on the joint creation and engagement with neurodiverse groups and neurodivergent non-typical individuals. The aim is to enable Welcome to build on and improve its approach to inclusivity by addressing issues surrounding cognitive, physical and digital access to the hub and its resources for a variety of users. This involves looking at ways in which Welcome engages and co-creates with neurodiverse audiences with a focus on collaboration, research and public engagement. The project, although based in London, has a wider reach. Not only did I work at Welcome in the Welcome Hub, but the project scope allowed me to deliver a publication in Dublin and carry out case studies, interviews, and prototype testing in Cambridge, Oxford, Southampton, Manchester, Devon, Cornwall, as well as London. The project is based at the Welcome Hub, a transdisciplinary research space. During my 2 years in this space, there have been 2 separate research groups awarded residencies. One, Created Out of Mind, a group that focused on the dementias, and then Heart and Soul, a group of people with and without learning disabilities and autistic people who are exploring human value. These two distinct groups with a common interest in the mind allowed me the opportunity to carry out a number of ongoing engagements, including several co-creation workshops. The research for Design in the Mind was carried out through primary and secondary research with mixed methods using multiple modes. This included virtual tours of the hub and wider welcome for the target group, and then VR tours of project participants, safe sensory spaces for welcome staff, and other examples as illustrated. Due to the constraints of the project being a 2-year project, the types of minds and themes explored and engaged with focused on those who are neurodivergent and neurotypical, in particular, people who are living with a dementia, those who are dyspraxic, dyslexic, and autistic persons. A key part of Design in the Mind are the project participants, who I call the citizen researchers, they are cognitive cousins, explorers of the Welcome Collection and the Welcome Hub, and experts in their own lived experiences. The citizen researchers provided contributions to the project, informing the iterations and offerings. The themes that came out of this were autonomy, engagement, and inclusion, and these were based on research findings and insights. This led to outcomes such as a jointly programmed and curated 5-day hub program called Our Brains and Us with the London-based charity, the Institute of Imagination. The hub program consisted of interactive sensorial games and toolkits for staff and visitors, during which over 700 visitors and staff were able to take part in the interactive sensorial games. This helped inform the toolkits, and that I will expand on later in the presentation. The next steps were to create offerings that consider the entirety of a welcome collection and hub visitors' whole experience. And by that I mean pre-welcome, pre-on-site visits, and post-welcome. This informed the Heads Up experience. Heads Up is an umbrella initiative providing an enhanced experience such as remote introduction to toolkits and inclusive signposting. The legacy items left behind by Design in the Mind will be physical tools, the training and guidance, recommendations, new relationships, and networks. Insights from the research have been used to create practical designs that assist the visitor's overall experience through an umbrella initiative that I previously mentioned called Heads Up. This will improve pre- and post-welcome collection experiences through interventions, as previously explained. So some of those will consist of promoting and toolkits and inclusive signposting. And this aims to promote and encourage organizational change through physical tools, training, and guidance. And this has been done with the VEA Visitor Experience team and Access, and they've been feeding into the process. What you can see here are some of the toolkits. The toolkits seek to complement and build on the emergent and expanding inclusive offerings at Welcome through bringing in alternative modes of communication and impacting how Welcome not only engages but also communicates with its audiences. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Natasha. So that's a great example of how we're opening up dialogues in kind of new arenas of inclusion, looking at neurodiversity. And Luca will now go on to talk about a project which, again, opens up new dialogues around sensory diversity.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Luca Killy, and I'm an experienced designer with a background in social science. And I've been working with the Royal National Institute of Blind People for the last 1.5 years towards changing perceptions around visual impairment. Only 3% of people that are registered blind are actually fully blind. And the other 97% actually have useful sight left. And I am amongst those 97%, making me a lived experience designer and researcher. Having an invisible disability affects a person in their everyday life, but it also can have a broader social, emotional, and psychological impact. Therefore, the aim of this project was to break the stigma and to reshape the way that we represent people that see differently, and to reshape the way we see them. Hence the project title, How We See. An important challenge that emerged from the research was how to get people to empathize with sight loss. To address this, I felt it was important to encourage the younger generation to understand sensory diversity, our personal spectrum of sight, sound, taste, and smell, and the fact that everyone sees differently. As we all sense things differently, I felt that this was a great entry point to raise awareness around visual impairment in a way that everyone can relate to. Through speaking to the many stakeholders within the school system, from head teachers to the pupils themselves, and facilitating workshops with 76 Key Stage 2 children, as well as half a dozen teachers, I've developed a teaching resource that teaches young children about sensory diversity. The materials in this resource help teachers to cover topics that are related and relevant to the syllabus, whilst at the same time highlighting the underlying message of sensory diversity and sight loss. The contents are organized by the subjects PCHE, English, Maths, and Science. And in addition to the teaching resource, I've also developed a volunteer pack that provides materials for a visually impaired volunteer to visit a school and facilitate a session on sight loss. In this, we address the fact that there are many blind people that have remaining sight, the confusing language around sight loss, and the many stereotypes and myths on blindness. Now, changing ingrained perception is a long-term process, but we are finally creating the tools to drive the conversation forward. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Luca. That concludes the age and diversity section of the presentations. We're now going to get another cohort to present, and that'll be led by Dr. Ninela Ivanova.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. I'm Ninela, and I lead the Inclusive Design for Business Impact area. It is my great pleasure to be chairing this next panel, which will showcase projects that fall under our two impact areas, Inclusive Design for Business and Inclusive Design for Social Impact. Great. A core philosophy of the Center over the last 30 years has been to improve life through design. And you have already seen some wonderful examples from my colleagues' work in the research areas of healthcare and age and diversity. The two newly created impact areas advance and expand the scope, applications, and global agenda for inclusive design. Inclusive Design for Business Impact looks at how inclusive design can directly influence and transform business and industry. Working with business, from Fortune 500 companies to SMEs, has always been key, spanning projects from short-term experimental work to large-scale collaborations. This year, we have built on our long-standing relationship with Tata Consultancy Services, looking at advancing the employee experience in a major airline. We have also worked on a data project with WSP to create a health index for cities. Inclusive Design for Social Impact looks at addressing social issues at a global scale. This builds on previous project, looking at migrant workers in the Middle East, aging in a vertical city in Hong Kong, and rebuilding communities in Fukushima after the tsunami. Tonight's projects showcase the power of inclusive design in this context. We worked with children in South London, looking at lifestyle and obesity, and over the last 3 years, we've worked in the city of Derry on urban transformation and mental health. We have also continuously engaged in knowledge exchange activities, as Rama mentioned before, looking at executive education and academic consultancy in inclusive design, design thinking, and creative leadership. These activities translate the work of the Center into the bloodstream of companies, organizations, consultancies, change makers, and future leaders. And before I invite the panel to join me on stage, I will tell you a little bit about creative leadership. Creative leadership is a homegrown research area pioneered by Rama. It's a transformational process that enables individuals and organizations to access innate creativity and leadership potential. Over the last 8 years, creative leadership has focused on establishing a holistic program of research, personal and organizational transformation, project delivery, and training. Our creative leadership is largely bespoke, but this year we had the first open creative leadership masterclass here at the Royal College of Art, which was sold out. And we have 2 new dates for your diary. So on November the 28th and 29th, we'll have the next one. So do check it out or grab me later with a glass of wine if you wanted to know more about it. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite my colleagues to join me on stage. We have Juliette Poggi, Evelina Gadjeva, Dr. Gerard Briscoe, Gail Ramster, and Dr. Jack Spencer. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have the largest panel tonight, so I watch the presentations from here. Click.
Thank you.
And now over to Juliette and Eva.
So welcome everyone. My name is Juliette and this is my colleague Evelina. Today we're going to walk you through our current project with Tata Consulting Services, TCS, and a leading Asian airline. We have a history of collaboration with TCS. We have done 2 projects with them already. The first was looking at humanizing the personality of a chatbot, which, according to a workshop result, means giving it David Attenborough personality. Don't blame me. The second is on the topic of new forms of vocal accessible interactions. Now I'm introducing you to our latest project with TCS in collaboration with one of the leading Asian airlines. The project, Air Control Reimagined, looks at improving the Operation Control Center, the OCC, at an international airport. My colleague Eva will explain further.
Thank you, Juliette. The organization is recognized for the excellence in passenger services. Now the company aims to provide the same excellence for the staff at the OCC, which is the most demanding department. The OCC needs to repurpose and keep pace with the change and speed of technology. It is the beating heart of the airline. The Operation Control Center is where massively complex operations are done. The team is working on 12-hour shifts, 24/7, 365 days per year, in order to continue the smooth operations of the flight schedules. And therefore, our design interventions should be non-disruptive improvements, which is very challenging. The expertise of the Helen Hamlyn Center for Design is inclusive design, but as previously said, it is not only about age and disability, it is about improving life. We identified 3 major areas to focus on, and we are looking on how the environment affects health and well-being of the people working there, and how technology supports making the right decisions in critical situations.
So we started by exploring the current digital systems that are used in the OCC. And this is where the collaboration with Tata Consulting Services is particularly helpful, as they are leading experts in new technologies. As you will appreciate, I won't be able to show you the full extent of our design solutions, but here just a few glimpses. So what you can see here is just one of the softwares that the OCC staff has to access every day on their machines. So it's incredibly complex, as you can see. So to make this information more accessible, we worked on the design and layout of a video wall, which has actually just been installed in the OCC very recently, a month or 2 ago. So we suggested new ways to display all this complex information for it to be accessible at a glance.
And we are also working remotely, but very closely with the OCC staff to understand their needs and preferences on the workplace. And we've tested different layout options already.
And when it comes to workspace, it is not only about efficiency, but also well-being and communication. So here what you can see is a few visualizations showing ideas for a resting room and an alternative work environment.
We are also currently organizing a series of workshops with the OCC members and managers to improve collaboration between different departments. And we are using creative leadership, as Ninella said, to frame and deliver this. We look forward to share more with this next year on this exciting project.
Thank you, Juliet and Eva. Now we're staying on the transcontinental stage, and I will hand over to Dr. Gerard Briscoe to talk about a global healthcare index.
Thank you, Nelena. I'm a design researcher specializing in design computing research. The project was done in partnership with the engineering firm WSP and the SALAS Global Network of Knowledge Exchange Experts. And it's a project where big data meets design thinking, but is not a data-led project. The key criteria was ranking how future-ready are cities to deliver healthcare. So I will briefly introduce our approach of designing for robustness and the three core pillars of the project: the category selection, the indicator selection, and the city selection. By future readiness, we mean the emerging future health challenges in 5 to 10 years, not the potential of flying buses in London. As the project, to have robustness with credibility meant not being limited to only data-led predictions of the future. And designing for robustness in this way, as the project was not data-led, required engaging with subject matter experts, SMEs, in the selection of criteria, the categories and indicators of the index. Just as we did here at the European Healthcare Design Conference, these and other creative engagement events with SMEs were critical for achieving robustness. For the category selection, we identified 3 category pairs, with the aging and lifestyle including subcategories such as work-life balance, while the other significant risk category included elements such as the risk from a global pandemic and the risk from increasing anti-vaccination movements. One of the indicators we identified within environment and climate was noise pollution, which is an emerging problem from increasing urban densities. For example, Delhi, Cairo, and Istanbul are considered to have now the worst noise pollution, while cities such as Zurich, Vienna, and Munich are considered to have some of the least noise pollution problems. Another element, core pillar of the project, was the question of city selection. And again, to ensure robustness, it was important that the global index had a selection of cities with the greatest cultural significance. We identified 50 cities from the estimated 2,000 to 6,000 globally and determined an approach for calculating cultural significance, with these 3 cities being the most culturally significant, based upon global connectivity and GDP. We also considered different approaches to visualizing the index, including this worldview, which highlights the distribution of city future readiness across all categories. However, this was done with simulated data at the time, and so any resemblance to cities present or past is purely coincidental. We also consider a regional comparison where the cities for each of the regions were combined. And here you can see that North America and Asia have been highlighted to show their respective future readiness. The project has now concluded, and we have since handed the research and the design over to WSP for future implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. So we are moving into the space of inclusive design for social impact, and Gail Ramster will talk about our Stockwell.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Gail, and I worked with research associate Carmel Cohen on our Stockwell, a project supported by the Battersea Power Station Foundation and Hyde Foundation. They asked Carmel to spend 9 months researching ways to address childhood obesity through design. No small task. But what made this unique was that it focused on the lives of people living around 2 housing estates in the heart of Stockwell in South London, very close to where we are today. But where NHS data shows that 44% of 11-year-olds are overweight or obese, compared to the average for England, still a rather high 34%. Carmel began by seeking to understand the lives of people within this very local community. So what were the barriers that people faced in Stockwell that was making living active lives so challenging for them? Armed with a 2 square metre illustrated map of Stockwell, printed on canvas as a conversation starter, she went wherever the people were, to the Stockwell Festival, the Day of Portugal event, an under-5s barbecue, toddler groups, school fetes, attracting both active citizens and passers-by to share their experiences. She also managed to reach teenagers, sometimes harder to involve, through ad hoc on-street interviews, as well as taking over a Year 10 art and design class at the local secondary school. The personal insights that she collected helped her identify the 4 themes most relevant to Stockwell, though by no means unique to Stockwell. Cultural differences. For example, to quote, "In my culture, a fat child is a healthy child." Fears around safety. I don't even let my 15-year-old go to the park. The high street, lots of places have closed down. Post office, bank, there's no central parade, there's nowhere to go. And finally, boredom, particularly for teenage girls. Public space is really designed to encourage teenagers to spend time. But what's left? There's too many chicken shops, but I still go to them. These 4 themes, whilst broad and challenging, nonetheless provide new ways of approaching the topic of childhood obesity in a way more relevant to people's lived experiences. They form the basis of briefs, from which local people came up with their own ideas. Through a series of different co-design workshops, one designed for children, one for parents, and one for teenagers, with some of the strongest ideas being exhibited locally to assess local buy-in and invite further participation. Such as the idea for Stockwell Youth, a social media project run by young people to introduce a new generation to local youth-focused individuals, organisations, events and activities. We've now handed this project back to our partners to continue and hope that the local engagement we initiated will grow and that ideas like Stockwell Youth will be carried forward by the community. With Carmel, I am producing a publication, Designing with Communities, Lessons on Social Design from the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design, which focuses on the methods used in both our Stockwell and past community-focused design research projects, including our Future Foil, which you'll hear about next. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jack Spencer, who will talk about our Future Foil.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure many regulars to the Symposium might be familiar with the Our Future Foil project by now. But for those of you who aren't, the project is focused on improving the mental health and well-being along a 6-mile stretch of riverfront in Londonderry, Northern Ireland, through social and cultural interventions. Following 3 years of intensive research, engagement and design, the project was launched publicly at the end of last year with an extended version of this video.
I've always imagined what my future would look like. My teacher told us they're going to put reeds along our bridge. Big, colourful versions of the ones on the riverbank that click together like keyboard keys. Sometimes I imagine flying above the river and seeing the new reeds change from blue to purple to bright Halloween orange. My granny keeps calling the reeds a landmark. When all the wee bubbles are lit up along the river, she said it'll be as impressive as that big tower in Paris. Imagine that, our river looking all beautiful and important. Celebrate with us and help us share our future foil.
And the full extended 5-minute version can be found on that website. The three interventions in the video are the largest proposed interactive art installation in Northern Ireland, the Foyle Reeds, that changed the perception of the bridge from one of negativity to one of celebration through interactive light installations. The Foyle Bubbles, a series of portable spaces that can be used by businesses and community groups to bring life and festivity to the river whilst providing mental health support without the clinical stigma. And the Foyle Experience, a series of light and sound installations that reduce isolation and provide cognitive distractions even on listed and heritage infrastructure such as the Craigavon Bridge you can see here. So I'm pleased to say that the launch generated considerable interest with press and key stakeholders and led to the creation of the project as a separate entity with a project board consisting of director-level members from key government departments such as the Department for Health, Department for Communities, Department for Infrastructure and the Northern Ireland Executive Office. Each one of these government departments is now taking responsibility for developing and delivering one of these interventions. Whilst, of course, I'd love to show you new visuals from the design and development of the project, the reality is that the exciting design and engagement work has now given way to the important work of building business cases based on economic and technical feasibility. So whilst there's nothing too exciting on the visual front that I can show you, what is really exciting is the board are meeting next month to sign off the first of its kind cross-departmental business case for administering a potential multi-million-pound capital fund from government to deliver this project. So there's still plenty of bureaucratic hurdles to overcome, but I think gradually we're starting to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Juliette, Eva, Gerard, and Gail. This concludes the Inclusive Design for Business and Social Impact panel. And now I'd like to hand over to Professor Joanne Bishard, who will present our doctoral researchers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joanne Bishard, and I'm the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design's new Professor of Accessible Design. This final panel of the evening's event will report on the work of the HHCD's PhD programme. This is a fairly new programme. This is a fairly new programme that began with a single PhD candidate, Katie Gaudian, or Dr. Katie Gaudian. We then joined forces with the School of Communication and jointly supervised the Arts and Humanities Research Council funded Creative Exchange initiative that focused on exploring new approaches to the design PhD. We are now accepting candidate applications beyond programmes, and between 2018 and 2019 we received over 50 outlines for PhD research. These outlines came from prospective candidates from across the globe. This interdisciplinary and people-centred programme centres on the key themes of people, place and technology. It offers candidates the opportunity to engage with the academic thinking behind inclusive design, but also, over the 3 to 5 year programme, gives the candidates the opportunities to explore inclusive methods and processes at a deeper and more impactful level. Each PhD candidate is matched with the school that reflects their research. Currently, these include the schools of architecture, communication, and design. The benefit of this joint approach is that the candidates get in-depth training in inclusive design theories and practice, whilst also receiving state-of-the-art direction from their associated school. This year, we have had 2 candidates complete their PhDs. Dr. Will Rennell, whose PhD explored sonic inclusion, is now a postdoc innovation fellow here at the HHCD, as well as being a research associate. He has been funded by the AHRC's LDoc programme. His research is titled Exchanging Histories, Disability, Art, Activism and Academia, and is in partnership with Tourette's Hero and the Wellcome Trust. Dr. Bastien Bayer, whose research focused on new sustainable materials for architecture and their development in non-specialised inclusive environments has appeared in Design magazine and is currently exploring postdoc opportunities at the School of Art in Berlin. And here he is with his examiners and his very, very relieved supervisor. We also had the pleasure of welcoming our first visiting PhD student to the college's post-experience programme. This initiative gives external PhD students from across the world the opportunity to come to the RCA and spend a month to a term with a specific school or research department. This year, our first PEP student was Unique Blacher from the University of Florence, whose PhD research was looking at the architecture of daycare for children with autism. Oh, here we go. There he is. There's Unique. And he's actually interviewing our first PhD graduate, Dr. Katie Gaudian, on her work working with autism. But to move on to this evening's event, you will now hear from 3 of our current 8 students. Our other 5 candidates are unable to join us this evening as they are in the field, so to speak. Silke Hoffman continues her work exploring post-mastectomy lingerie needs. Maria Gonzalez is exploring life within work in a Silicon Valley corporate campus. Imogen Privet, who has focused on the effects of co-working on workplace design, is in the final stages of completion. Peggy Wang has recently joined us from the School of Design and is exploring family-centred engagement in neonatal care. And our new candidate, Brendan Comain, is investigating the surroundings of dementia-focused care home assistants using technology and media. But you'll hear more from them next year. My ambitions for this programme is for it to grow. I'm incredibly excited about the new space we will have in the new building in Battersea, which will provide a wonderful opportunity and a fantastic setting to increase PhD research in collaboration with the RCA schools and focusing on inclusive design and its wider social impact both nationally and internationally. So if you're thinking of doing a PhD, don't hesitate to contact me. So I'm now going to invite this evening's PhD presenters, Laura Salisbury, Nick Bell and Wenbo A, to join me on the stage. Laura is entering her 3rd and final year. She's very excited. And she is now going to update you on her research on wearables in stroke recovery.
Thank you, Joanne. Welcome to everyone. Lovely to see you all here. I'm Laura, a current and final year PhD candidate, and today I present to you a brief insight into a series of early experiments investigating the use of garments as platforms for care, so to support stroke rehabilitation. Every 2 seconds, someone somewhere has a stroke, and an overwhelming majority of those, in fact, 87%, experience an upper limb deficit. And so when stroke disrupts the ability to use your finer motor control within your hands, simple daily tasks like picking up your morning coffee become incredibly difficult. It is suggested that current approaches to rehabilitation emphasize the success of achieving a task, so the success of picking up that coffee. But actually the quality of the movements that are used to pick up that cup of coffee are not emphasized enough. And this means that individuals use movements that maybe skirt around the issue and compensate for that. And as a result, we see the impact on the ability to regain full recovery of the limb. We see an example of this from a body scan of a participant on the screen. And while studies have demonstrated the potential for affecting the rate of recovery within the early stages, still it is observed that 85% of the time within the first 3 weeks of a stroke survivor's daytime is spent immobile and alone. This research works to develop a new textile to provide brain stimulation for the moving public body, not the private body. Garments are identified as having a great potential in influencing recovery due to their consistent, familiar, close, seamless contact with the body. And in early experimentation, as you can see on the screen, 3 concepts were developed in the lab. Firstly, integrating what we call constraint-induced movement therapy, so where we restrain the unaffected limb, which is often used instead of the affected limb, which forces the individual to use their affected limb. And that's not great for everyone. It's not inclusive. And so then we move on to actually integrating a sort of a nudge or an indication within that textile, a method of navigating movement. So how do you enable that limb to move with that quality of movement that we're missing so much? So the textile, pairing those behaviours together, we're able to navigate the limb into what we describe as a quality movement. And finally, we investigated the use of de-weighting the limb. So one of the major barriers in just being able to perform voluntary movement, as much as you may want to after having a stroke, is the weight accumulated from the extensive flexor synergies which appear within the body. And so we are able to pair those material behaviours with body behaviours. And you can see a small indication on the screen. Just of material changes. And so the gathering of individual body data is achieved by body scanning, and we input this into the digital knit program where the fit and composition can be pre-tested before we use these expensive materials, which on a very, very small scale are expensive. But we're working at the moment with some new funding to scale that up and make that a reality for people. And just a final word is our team comprised of a range of true lived experiences, and we've been working together, living alongside each other within certain lived perspectives and contexts for over 2 years now. This comprises of stroke survivors, support workers and consultants, and we tell stories through material explorations. We always have the garment in mind. So we're currently working on new developments. This was early experimentation, but we now are in the pipeline of developing a new textile for brain stimulation to work alongside the body, and we hope to share this with you in the near future. In the meantime, all of these early experimentations are being written up and presented at the Design Museum in December, so you are more than welcome to come and join us, and are exhibited in the London Design Festival if you are around and about from Thursday onwards. But for now, many thanks, and I hand you over to Wembo.
Yes, next is Wembo, who is also entering his final year, and he will present his research on design literacy in healthcare.
Hello, my name is Wenbo. My research is looking at empowering design literacy and engagement in health-promoting hospitals. Health-promoting hospitals is an idea imposed by the World Health Organization. It developed in Europe, but China recently started to incorporate this innovation. The aim is shifting the hospital culture from a treatment center to a more dynamic social health centered. One of the hypotheses from my research is asking if hospital can also serve as community center, libraries, health education center, or even fitness center and leisure centers. In order to test these ideas, I did two practices. The first one is inclusive action research. It's looking at low literate medical needs in Hanton Village in China. I ran an inclusive survey design workshop with local clinic and low literate villagers to encourage them to design their own method to represent medication times and dosages. Here are some examples done by them. They use materials and colors as their own visual language to represent complex medical information. The second practice work with children, using inclusive design practice to promote dental health education. Children learn dental health information through the creative activities ranging from drawing, gaming, and making sculpture and dolls. In the end, we held an exhibition, including a mini fashion show and interactive game as a platform to evaluate and receive feedback among children, parents, teachers, dentists, and researchers. My research contribution to knowledge has 3 levels. First, to contribute to the transformational process of health promoting hospitals. Secondly, to improve healthcare service in hospitals. Last but not least, hopefully it will show the power of design in Chinese public sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Wenbo. So I'm now going to hand over to our last presenter of the evening, Nick Bell. Nick is at the beginning of his 2nd year and will introduce his work on design as a preventative mental health strategy. Sorry, Nick.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks. Hello, I'm Nick Bell, and my research is about widening access to preventative mental health. That 1 in 8 children experience a condition of mental ill health, that 1 in 6 adults do, that 75% of mental illness in adult life starts by the age of 18, leads me to ask, do we understand the neoliberal system we live in correctly? We may know it primarily as an economic doctrine, but through these stats it reads more like a system of psychological subordination. Is this system, in its manufacture of inequality and crisis, that strips communities of their collective efficacies? Is it sabotaging people's efforts to help themselves, wrecking their attempts at mental health prevention? This project is about the role of inclusive design methods widening access to preventive mental health. There is great value in communities finding more effective ways to recognise and make the most of their strengths collectively, and in using their strengths to boost social networks, improve collaborative skills, to get better at acting together in each other's interests. And my research seeks to provide inclusive design methods and tools for this purpose. I'm in the early discovery stages of developing tools and processes accessible enough for community groups of non-designers to use autonomously. I've established a working relationship with Clapton Commons, a community organisation working with neighbourhood groups in North East London. And I'm about to begin facilitating a series of community asset mapping workshops in which people will be invited to populate a large-scale neighbourhood map with what they consider to be the assets, the strengths existing in their community. All the map data will be captured for local residents on digital and physical maps. These will reveal a picture of existing assets and their connections across their neighbourhood. The second phase of this project will look at future connections intimated by the map data. It will develop design tools community groups can use to workshop these connections into collaborative social forms, such as gardening clubs, community kitchens, choirs, in fact, whatever they see fit to do. The desired outcome in the long term being the infrastructuring of an enabling ecosystem for local health prevention. Thanks.
Well, that concludes our presentations for this evening, and I will now hand back to our director, Rama.
Wow, what a lot of work, a lot of energy, some great ideas in those presentations, all of which bring to life inclusive design. So I've only got a couple of formal things to do and say before we have the most anticipated event of the evening, which is a drink. As Jeremy mentioned, it's 25 years of inclusive design. And I like to refer to the top photograph as a game called Spot the Scandinavians. We worked with the Norwegians to produce a book called Innovating with People, which in is a high information, easy access manual for inclusive design and architecture. This was done with Oni Eichaug and Victoria Høysether, I hope I said that right, from the Norwegian Centre for Design and Architecture. And we thought it would be a great idea to celebrate 25 years to give 2 copies away. So if you notice next to your seat, there's a ticket of some form. And we want you to grab that ticket. And if I could invite Evelina Gadieva, the architect of this process, but also the symposium manager, to stage to reach into this wonderful little silver box and pull out some winning tickets.
Okay, let's hope I will. D4. D4. D like dinosaur.
There you go. So that's, please could you come on stage? And who's our second winner?
E15.
That would be the person at the end in row E.
Yes.
Oh.
It's you. It's E.
Yes, please come on stage. Maybe you didn't want the book. In fact, you're both beautifully color-coded. Look at that. So if you could hand one. Go. So thank you. The reason everyone was laughing is Michaela is an ex-research associate. We did not plan that. And we deliberately did not give RCA staff or our staff, and I apologize for this, Helen, we didn't put a ticket on your seat either. So if you want more inclusive design in your life, I'm very happy to announce that we are partnering with the College of Creative Studies in Detroit to hold Include 2019. Include is our biannual conference, and it's happening this year from November the 7th to the 9th in the city of Detroit. Why Detroit? Well, it's 2 reasons. Jeremy, Roger, and I never held an Include in the Americas, and we thought it's about time. And when you think about leadership, I think they need it. So we decided for Detroit, also because of the incredible energy that you have with communities, to grow an inclusive approach. So Detroit was our choice, and we will have lots of workshops. We will have, Google is missing from there, but they've just confirmed that they will be present. So please do join us for more inclusive design if you've not had enough already this evening. So the very final thing for me is just to thank a few people. I want to thank all the presenters. Your passion and purpose clearly came through. I want to thank the other staff at the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design. We've had a couple of people leave this year, but they've been very implemented and implicated in this event and this yearbook. And that's Kay Sanford Beale and Mark Byrne, who you'll see in here, and I hope you all get a copy of this. It's kind of deliberately a 1970s blue and pink, because that was the decade in which I was born. And I want to thank Elizabeth Raby, Lizzie Raby, for managing the production of this yearbook, and Evelina Gadieva for managing the production of the symposium. And alongside them, Juliet Poggi, who stepped in and did many, many different things, including producing the poster exhibition outside. So we have reached the end of the symposium. Thank you all for the energy. Thank you all of those people that are on the live stream. We have a truly global audience inside Battersea, inside the RCA tonight. So thank you all. Thank you, the RCA. Thank you, everyone here. And drinks are now served.